Mr. Richard Graham.
Mr. Speaker, this House today debates unusual, if not unprecedented, circumstances. And it is a matter of deep frustration, disappointment and regret to me that we are not only here to do this, but that I am here as an individual who has also played a part in the events leading up to this debate. For it is not only the Foreign Affairs Committee that has been effectively prevented from visiting Hong Kong, but it was also myself a week ago who was rejected a visa application to join the UK-China Leadership Forum in Shanghai, on the basis of which the entire parliamentarian delegation pulled out of that leadership forum. And so we have to ask ourselves the question, why has this happened? And the underlying answer, of course, is, as my right honourable friend from Croydon rightly mentioned, that we have a serious disagreement with China on our ability to discuss and debate issues in Hong Kong. And as other members have pointed out, it is a sad thing that even before the FAC report has been drafted, let alone completed, China has already come to the conclusion that it must be a negative report in principle because of its existence rather than because of its content, which is as yet unknown. And in the same way, Mr. Speaker, I clearly was penalised for having the committee to organise a debate on Hong Kong on the 22nd of October. In my speech on that day, I congratulated Britain and China's leaders in 1984 in finding a formula and later the trust that maintained confidence within Hong Kong and by the world in Hong Kong. And I went on to say that 30 years on, the architects can congratulate themselves. Broadly, Hong Kong has thrived and remains special and successful. And I concluded at the end of that speech that the people of Hong Kong and we, meaning here all of us in Parliament, have no interest, no advantage or no conceivable selfish purpose in any form of car crash with Hong Kong's sovereign master, China. Rather, it is in all our interests, but particularly those of Britain and China, in fulfilling the joint declaration that Hong Kong continues to thrive and prosper in a different world from that of 1984 or even 1997. Now, Mr. Speaker, I do not believe that there is anyone in this House or anyone anywhere who could take violent objection to the thoughts and beliefs behind that statement. But I'm afraid there was an objection which I received today in a copy. It had been posted with insufficient postage, so it arrived only today. And it came from Ambassador Liu of the People's Republic of China, who wrote to me. He expressed severe displeasure and disappointment about a letter that I had written to him some 10 days before the debate, outlining my reasons for holding it. And to recap the crucial part of the reason, as chairman of the All-Party Parliamentary China Group, I believe I have two main responsibilities, and they are outlined on our right paper and clearly laid out on our website. The first is to provide a forum for debate on all issues of bilateral interest, and the second is to help inform parliamentarians through regular visits to China. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that holding the debate on Hong Kong was fulfilling the first objective. But Ambassador Liu wrote to me that matters relating to Hong Kong are none but China's internal affairs, where China is firmly opposed to intervention or interference of any kind by any country or any individual, including the House of Commons inquiry, debate and investigation, including Hong Kong. Your insistence on having the aforementioned debate in the House of Commons has in effect meddled in the internal affairs of Hong Kong and sent out a wrong signal. Such moves, exploited by the opposition in Hong Kong, will only create an impression that Britain supports unlawful activities such as Occupy Central. Well, Mr. Speaker, I have read excerpts from my own speech. I do not believe that there is any objective reader of that speech who could reach any of the conclusions reached by Ambassador Liu in his letter, least of all the impression that Britain supports unlawful activities such as Occupy Central. Occupy Central did not feature in my speech at all. He went on to say that as chair of the All-Party Parliamentary China Group, quote, charged with the responsibility and mission of advancing China-UK relations, unquote, which is not strictly my mission, as I have just explained, he asked me to, quote, refrain from interfering in the internal affairs of Hong Kong as well as China, and urged me to do more things to promote China-UK relationship rather than disrupt and undermine its healthy development. Now, Mr. Speaker, it is true that relations at the moment between our two countries have improved considerably. Both my right honourable friend, the Minister in his place, and I were part of the very successful delegation led by the Prime Minister to China a year ago. Earlier this summer, we had a very successful visit by Chinese Premier Li Keqiang to the UK. All of us here want to see positive relations between Britain and China for precisely the reasons that I have outlined. We have much that is to our mutual benefit, much that are mutual challenges, and much together that we are doing to make the world a better place. But I do genuinely believe that the role of diplomats is to build bridges, not barriers, to solve problems, not to create them, to help bring our two countries closer together and to strengthen the relationships between this Parliament and the National People's Congress in Beijing. And so let me therefore, for the record, Mr. Speaker, respond to Ambassador Liu's comments that I should do more things to promote the China-UK relationship. For 3 years, I was this country's British Trade Commissioner to China and also our consul to Macau. Later, I opened the first merchant banking group office in China and listed the first Chinese company on the London Stock Exchange. I was part of the Anglo-Chinese expedition, the first ever crossing of the Taklamakan Desert in 1993. And I should, Mr. Speaker, by most rights have died during that expedition by having amoebic dysentery, saved by some unbelievably strong antibiotics, which meant I couldn't eat for 5 days while walking some 25 miles a day in the heat of this hitherto uncrossed desert. So every day since the winter of 1993 has, to some extent, been an extra day in my life. And I vowed then, when I came out of the desert, so thin that my trousers literally fell down when I pulled them up, and went straight to Shanghai to open the office of my employers. I vowed then that I would dedicate a chunk of my life to doing things that would continue to help relations between Britain and China. And so, some 2 years later, my wife, Anthea, made me aware of what was happening in Chinese orphanages in Shanghai. She was, at the time, the person in charge of the welfare team in the Shanghai Expatriates Association. And many members will know that largely because of the one-child system, huge numbers of orphans, often predominantly women, were dumped on the doors of orphanages, where they would spend the rest of their life in an institution. This was a human tragedy. And my wife's dedication to helping 2 or 3 individual orphans led me to create a charitable company in Hong Kong called Children First, and to get pledges of significant amounts of money from businesses in Hong Kong to support the creation of what would effectively become a foster care system in Shanghai. At that time, talks with the Shanghai municipal government fell through, largely on the issue of trust about who would have control of the money. But the relationship with the Civil Affairs Bureau was so strong that when a British citizen, Robert Glover, arrived in Shanghai and was introduced by my wife to the Civil Affairs Bureau, he was able to take forward our original vision and create what is now Care for Children, which is the first ever joint venture Sino-British charity and is now joint ventured with the central government's Civil Affairs Bureau. It has, Mr. Speaker, to date, taken between 250,000 and 300,000 orphans out of orphanages and into foster homes. It is a remarkable success, and I pay tribute to Rob Glover, who is in London this week, and all that the charity has achieved. And I'm proud to have been first its advisor and then later a director. So that is one example of a personal commitment to improving things between Britain and China, which I hope will lay out for the House that far from doing things to disrupt and undermine the healthy development between our two countries, I believe I have consistently tried to enhance the relationships. And in the same context, it is deeply disappointing that when the Foreign Affairs Committee rightly decides this summer, due to the events in Hong Kong and due to the 6-monthly update report on Hong Kong by Her Majesty's government, that it is time for them to write a report on the situation of the relations between the UK and Hong Kong. It is very disappointing that a China which is now in every way stronger, more confident, more robust than it was 35 years ago when first I visited, has been unable to recognise that this should be seen as a positive development, one to encourage, to open doors rather than to close them, to welcome the report, which in many ways may turn out to be a lot more positive than they will expect. So today's debate, Mr. Speaker, is unfortunate in many ways. When my visa was rejected 10 days ago, I decided not to say anything about it. I did not want to contribute to a worsening situation. It was already, to me, a huge disappointment that the forum like the UK-China Leadership Forum, which is precisely to have that dialogue which countries with different histories, cultures, systems of government and parliaments must have in order to overcome their differences of opinion and views on the world at large, was having to be disrupted on the simple principle that China chooses its delegation and we choose ours. And in the same way, the essence of today's debate is about the essential freedom that this House must have in order to fulfil our duties and obligations to our constituents. Our constituents are interested in a strong relationship with China, and of course the economy and business is a vital part of that. But there are other aspects of the relationship which our constituents are deeply interested in. Many of them relate to human rights and animal rights. Those issues must be raised by us. They must be debated and discussed. The all-party parliamentary group cannot avoid them, shouldn't avoid them, must discuss them, and we must recognise that there will be differences of opinion, but they should be aired and aired in a sensible, responsible way that recognises those cultural differences. That, I believe, Mr. Speaker, is what this debate is all about. Is about the ability of our House to discuss and debate and ultimately to enhance, not to disrupt, relations between these two great countries.